had such a name. Synagogue was really very beautiful and magnificent building here, and not only Jews, by the way, could come to the synagogue. Even Christian people went to the synagogue to listen to its choir and famous cantors, some of whom, like Herman Yadlovker, performed on the stage of the opera. And when Yadlovker emigrated from Latvia to America, he was a singer of Metropolitan Opera. And synagogue stood here only 70 years. On the 4th of July 1941, all Riga synagogues, except that in Old City, were set on fire. And some of them, like this one, with people inside. 300 Jews from Lithuanian town Šiauliai find shelter in the basement of the synagogue. All of them, and those who were caged on the streets, who were brought here from their were stuck in the building, and building was set on fire. All
to Jewish
saviors.
Okay.
All Jewish saviors were mentioned on this memorial. The sculptor, the designer of this memorial is young Latvian sculptor Elina Lasdiņa, who at the moment of the opening of the memorial was graduator of Academy of Fine Art. So she was a rather young woman, and her idea here is very simple. This falling wall symbolized the fate of Jews who were going to fall down to die. But here were people who supported them, and their names are written on these columns. They were Latvians, Russian, Polish people who saved Jews. Not all of them were recognized by Yad Vashem as righteous among the nations. Yes, because as far as I know, 140 Latvians were recognized, but not all of the people had enough documents which could prove. After the war, some of the people were really afraid to report about this because they could be called to NKVD or KGB and ask some questions. And the most famous of these people was Zhani Slipkin, and his portrait you may see in the middle. He saved more than 50 Jews from Riga ghetto. He had a team of friends, and they helped him, and he managed to replace some of the ghetto prisoners whom he received as workers. He was ordinary man, very simple one. He was a worker. He was a docker before the war. He worked in Riga port. But during the war he worked at Luftwaffe warehouses, which were nearby next to the market. So the market is very close to this place. And he received this labor commander from the ghetto, and when in the evening they should go back to the ghetto, he replaced them for his friends. And then they changed this uniform and they left the ghetto. So he had different ways of...
They fled Latvia?
No.
These persons?
You mean these...
the Jews which...
how could they leave Latvia
so
at the Holocaust time?
He was recognized as a... He was recognized for saving Jews. Were those Jews eventually saved?
They were saved, but they were hidden in different places, in some farmer houses, in some other places. And some of the Jews were hidden in his courtyard. And it was, can you imagine how dangerous it was? And he risked not only his life, but lives of his family. He had a wife and 2 children. So, and after the war, he wasn't recognized, let's say, by the state as a hero. And he was, I mentioned that people who saved, who helped, they could receive some unpleasant questions. For example, Zhanya Slipke, he was called to KGB and was asked to bring all the sacks with gold he received from Jews. Can you imagine what the gold could they have? So, on our right, it is Bikur Halim Hospital. This hospital, this clinic was built in Riga in the beginning of 20th, last century, with the support of American Joy. And being built as Jewish clinic, Bikur Halim received not only Jewish patients. Doctors of Bikur Halim treated Latvians and other people here, but the best Jewish doctors worked in Bikur Halim, and one of them was Vladimir Mintz. And we stopped here for you to look at the memorial plaque which is dedicated to him. Vladimir Mintz was the head of the surgical department here. I mean, Vladimir Mintz, he was really very famous surgeon. He made the first brain surgery in Latvia. He was even invited to Moscow to operate Lenin when Lenin was injured by panic plan. And as you all know, operation was successful and Lenin survived. And after this operation, he was offered a position in a clinic in medical academy in Moscow, but he preferred to come back to Riga. And he continued to work in Bikur Halim. But when ghetto was organized, he was sent to a ghetto together with other doctors who didn't commit suicide before, because a lot of doctors from Bikur Halim committed suicide before they were sent to a ghetto. They already realized what was going on. But Vladimir Mintz was inside the ghetto and he continued to help people, and he worked in a ghetto hospital. This hospital you will see in a few minutes. But we are inside the ghetto territory, and all the buildings around us, these wooden houses, all of them survived ghetto time, survived Nazis' occupation. Look at this, and here on this street, on Luzas 25, was hospital Linat Hatzedek. Is it correct pronunciation? So look at this building. It was gynecology clinic here. And at the beginning of Nazis' occupation, during first couple of months, this clinic was used as a hospital for German soldiers. But later, when ghetto was organized, they used this clinic as the only clinic for ghetto prisoners. Orphanage. We are in the center of the ghetto. So ghetto area wasn't very big. And in this part of the city, until before the war, 13,000 of people lived. Not all of them were Jewish. Here were Latvians, Russian, Polish people, poorest Jews. Some part of the ghetto, like here, look to the left, looks like a shtetl. And instead of 13,000, 30,000 of Riga's Jews were stuck here in the ghetto. Can you imagine? More than twice more, almost 3 times more people. All non-Jews were expelled out of here, were resettled from here. Was included into the ghetto territory. So it wasn't always parked here. Actually, this part of the city, it is the first plot of land which Riga Jews received here. It was the first Jewish cemetery. In 1725, this land was given to Riga Jews to open here cemetery, but before this time, they transferred their dead to the closest Lithuanian shtetls to be buried there. Only in 1725 they had the cemetery, and this cemetery was until 1920 it was the only cemetery for Jews in Riga. In 1920 new cemetery was opened in other part of the city, and this place was more or less like a memorial place. But until the 1930s, we continued bury people here if the family was allowed to do it. In 1941, on the 4th of July, the same events here. At the entrance to the cemetery were two buildings, a small synagogue and a building for Hebrew Kaddish. Both of the buildings were set on fire. 50 people died.
And who set these fires? Were they Germans or Latvians?
All orders were given by Germans, but almost everywhere the dirtiest work was done by local collaborators. And here...
Wuchko told us that there was... Joseph Wuchko yesterday told us that there was a special squad organized by the Latvian...
RIS Commando, self-defense police and
they
so
were
on.
even sent to Daugavpils to do the dirty work.
They were sent even to Ukraine, not only here, but here on this place. After the first extermination action, approximately at the place where this corner was in a big common grave, bodies of those people who were killed in their yards, on the streets, on the way to Rumbuva, were buried in a huge common grave. About 1,000 people.
By who?
By prisoners of the ghetto. So on the next morning after the first action, boys were sent to collect corpses. And cemetery wasn't actually, it was touched. Some of the headstones were broken, but cemetery existed until almost the end of 80s or 50s. When after the war, city officials of Riga decided that city needed to have a new park. And at that time they erased cemetery from the map of Riga, and no one would tell you now where all the headstones disappeared. Why do you think I stopped here? Because I wanted to explain you step by step that they took away from here. It is so I saved your life. So another Jewish thing. So they took away from here all of headstones. The fate of these headstones I will describe you a bit later. They redug all the ground here, and I spoke to one of my